Welcome everyone to today's session of Security and Sandwiches. This is a new year, it's 2025, and so we're going to try some new things. One of the new things we're trying this year is, instead of doing lunch in person at our offices, for anybody attending the session, we will actually give you a lunch voucher, a credit that you can use. And those will be sent out to those who were joined to today's session to your email. And so if you sign up in the future to join for a session but don't actually make it, unfortunately, you do have to be present to get that. But look for that in your email towards the end of our session, and you'll get a voucher credit that you can use online, and you'll have a couple days to use that. If you have any questions or issues with that, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'll help you get that sorted out. It is a new system for us this year, and so if there are any issues, this is a little bit of an experiment. But welcome again, and we've got some really good topics to cover today. We're excited. I'm excited to share what we've got planned. Before we get started, I want to just point out and call some attention to our website. There's a section on our website for events, and so if you're ever wondering what's upcoming with Stone, hey, what's Stone doing coming up soon, check out our website. We've got the list of events there. We've got currently our mobilesecurity.net West Coast tour happening right now, so if you are near one of these places and you want to check out our security trailers, check out a location near you. And then we've got future Security and Sandwiches, and keep an eye out there for some future events as well, because we'll have our typical client appreciations, Techtober, all the fun stuff. Also, we record these sessions and post them to YouTube, and so today's video I hope to have posted by Wednesday of next week, so look for this on the 5th. It's a great chance if you have to duck out early or you get that phone call that you can't avoid, you can catch up on the YouTube channel and see what's there. But definitely check out the other content that we have here, because there is quite a bit. A lot of information pertaining to Milestone, NetBox, OnGuard, or little tutorials on really just a bunch of different things. So check that out, and subscribe so you'll get those notifications, and that definitely helps us share the content with more people as well. All right, so let's jump straight in. We're going to deep dive here into Access Object Analytics, and then we're going to look at how Access Object Analytics interfaces with Milestone. So first thing we're going to pick a camera. And let's pick a camera that might have a little bit of activity on it at the moment. Let's do this guy. All right. So Access Object Analytics is it's an app that comes pre-embedded on the Access cameras, and it's available on any ARTPEC 8 or 9 camera and a selection of the ARTPEC 7 cameras. It is managed and upgraded through firmwares, so it is not an application that can be installed separately. You can't load it on a camera that it doesn't, it's not built for. If I go to apps here on this list, you'll see that we have the Access Object Analytics, and that's what we're looking at right there. You can start and stop the app. Another place it shows up here is on the Analytics tab. This is newer. This is a newer tab in the Access firmwares. And there we have the Access Object Analytics as well. And so if we jump to open, then we get this scenario. I'm going to actually just delete this one, and we'll start back to normal. So when you launch this the first time, let's actually do this on a different camera, because then we can launch it for the first time. Access Object Analytics, and open. And here's what we get. We're going to get this introduction that is going to walk us through some of the parameters at which we need to just be mindful of. So first is, object visibility. Is the object small in the scene? Is it large in the scene? Is it, near the camera, far from the camera? Is it hiding behind, something else? Obviously, in the two examples they give us here at the top, We've got a person obscured by a bush, a person partially obscured by a wall, a person obscured by a fence. All of those things are going to negatively impact our ability to detect. So we want that clear, unobstructed view, which is what we want in our security cameras anyway. So we'll click next, go on to the next one. Object size and object motion. So object size, again, something really small off in the distance, we're not going to have as good of detection on versus an object closer in the scene. The other thing is object motion. So for Axis to start detecting that this is an object in the scene and then classifying that object, it needs to be moving in the scene for 2 seconds. So if you have a tight view of a roadway, for example, and you've got cars flying through that scene really fast, if they don't exist in that scene for more than 2 seconds, it's not going to be detected and processed as a car. But if you have a wider view, where you've got it takes 10 seconds for the car to drive through the whole scene, that you should get really good results out of that. Okay. Other considerations are just image quality. Is it too washed out? Is it too dark? Do objects blend into the background? Different things to look at there. Okay. By default, so out of the gate, this is going to come with a scenario 1 that is already programmed and set up for you. And let me change back to this other camera. And what we get is the default is we have a selection area that is the whole view. And then by default, we're going to be detecting humans as well as vehicles and then all the subclassifications of vehicles. All right, so there's something that I want to point out as kind of a tip pretty early on here. For those of you working with Milestone, there's going to be 2 things that you kind of want to keep in mind as you deploy this or set up your system to leverage AOA. The first is that my recommendation is to leave scenario 1 as the full default, full view with all the detections. The reason for this is even if we're not using AOA for any other purpose, like, hey, I want to detect a person in this specific area of the scene, we still want that data to be available, processed, and sent to Milestone. So if we leave scenario 1 as our everything, the entire image, then we'll have that for Milestone to process. That metadata will flow to Milestone. If there's anything you want to set up as a custom detection and leverage that detection in a rule, set that up as an additional scenario. So we could do a scenario 2, a scenario 3, a scenario 4. The second point or tip to kind of just keep in mind with Milestone is you might be tempted to rename the scenarios to be something that is logical. The downside is that Milestone doesn't recognize or utilize those names. And we'll look at that as we dig into the Milestone part of how all of this interacts with Milestone. You can do it, and you can leverage the names, to make things logical for you. But just know that that could introduce some confusion inside the Milestone side, as well as you're not going to see all the different names inside of Milestone. So if we jump back, we'll jump into scenario 1. We'll look at what we have here. And we have the humans detection turned on. We have vehicles detections turned on. Within vehicles, we have subclassifications of bus, car, bike, truck, and other. We also have the ability to enable time in area. So time in area is going to say, I detect a person, but I'm not going to trigger that alert or that event until that person has been in the scene for more than whatever our time spec is here. The default is 120 seconds. You could say 10 seconds. You could say 15 seconds. And then if you're leveraging any kind of a rule on the camera itself, this keep the rule active as long as the object is tracked. interfaces with the access events rules on the camera, which can come into play in some kind of more complicated or complex scenarios. So for now, this is our scenario 1. I'm just going to do everything always across the whole scene, and I don't want the time in area. But let's jump back out of here, and we're going to move to a different camera, and we're going to set up a specific event. So we're going to look at this camera here that's on the exterior of my building. For those of you who haven't been to the GTC, this is the front entry, and just to the left of this camera is the front door. And what we can do here, so let's go to Analytics, Object Analytics, and open Object Analytics. It opens in a new tab. We can skip the introduction because we've already done that. We can we'll leave the default scenario, and we're going to do a new scenario. With this new scenario, we have several AI-based detections, and then we have separate motion-based detections. The motion-based detections are your typical line crossing, motion within an area and things like that. Those are historically inherited from like the Access Guard suite, where you would do motion in an area or a line crossing or something like that. Some of that is moving into the AOA app, but notice that this does not say AI-based detection down here. So these elements are only motion-based. The AI things are all here up at the top section. So we have the detection of object and area, and that is, it's pretty straightforward, just exactly as it sounds. Detects objects that move inside an area. We have line crossing, detects objects that cross a line. Time and area, detect objects that stay in an area for too long. That was that toggle that we turned on. Cross line counting, count objects that cross a line. And so if you have a roadway and you want to know how many vehicles are passing across that roadway, you could set a line across it and count the vehicles going in a direction. Or you could count people going in that direction. Occupancy in an area. So how many of those objects do we have in that area? Tailgating detection, detect objects that cross a line within a set time from each other. This tailgating detection is new as of the most recent firmware version. We can look and I can tell you which firmware this camera is on. Let's see, they moved it about, there we go. So this camera is on 12.2.52. So, but that is one of the nice things about Object Analytics is the camera has the processing capabilities and the processing power. So the features, we're open to a lot more additions in the feature sets that are done just through firmware updates. Okay, and then this new one, which is still in beta, although they have released it, is PPE monitoring. And so it's detect humans not wearing a hard hat. So if you have a PPE area where people, need to wear that hard hat, maybe as they walk out to a yard or as they're, whatever it might be, on a construction site, you can turn on some cameras with this PPE monitoring, and you'll get event triggers anytime that there is somebody not wearing a hard hat. This is still in beta, so accuracy of it may vary, but we'll see improvements with that as we get to future firmware releases as well. One thing I really want to call out that is maybe not obvious if this is a new concept to you. Access Object Analytics is all done at the edge on the camera. So this is the camera making these classifications and determinations. This is not data being sent to a cloud service and then the cloud service is doing that because that's its own can of worms. But this is the camera doing this all natively on the camera. So no external servers required, anything like that. You can tie this to Milestone. You can run it standalone, whatever you want to do. So for this scenario, we're going to do an example here where we set up a loitering at the front door. Maybe somebody's hanging out there. Maybe the door's locked and they're, trying to get in. Maybe it's somebody we're expecting or not expecting, or maybe it's, you know, a homeless person needing, you know, trying to find a place to tuck and hide. So we'll do time in area. We can hit next down in the bottom corner. Okay, what do we want to detect? Here, we're just gonna do humans, and I'm gonna do next. Okay, I don't care about humans necessarily in the whole area, so we can drag these corners and we can scale this back down to just the area that we want to detect inside of. So we'll include the bush. Maybe if they're hanging out here in the shrubs, we would want a detection on that. But we don't want a detection of anybody on the sidewalk. And so we can do that. Okay, now how long do we want them to be there before we trigger some sort of an event? We'll say 5 seconds just for kicks. And let me see if I can have somebody go out there. Okay, so we'll have somebody out there in just a moment. But what we'll see, oh, there we go. We got somebody else out there. Jason's out there. So we'll see that the detection is, actually I might need to hit finish first, and then we can open the scenario. What we should be seeing is a classification of a person showing there. There we go. So there's the person. Now let me turn off the time in area. And we can turn it back on. And what I want to do is set it for a longer time period so I can show you this part. So we have the detection. It's inside the area. That's the red box. Then we have this bar across the bottom. Let me see if I can zoom in on the screen so it's a little easier to see. We have this bar across the bottom that is slowly turning from green to red. Once it turns red, that's our 15 seconds that we have elapsed. All right. With that, now we have that event trigger of, hey, this event happened. This person loitered here at the door for too long. If Jason walks over towards the trailer, we would see that that time would reset. He's going to disappear. Okay, we're still getting a person detection, but it's outside of the area. And the loitering, our timer isn't running. As soon as he comes back, though, steps inside the area by the front door, we'll see that start to change again. So you also notice we lose him a little bit as he goes in between the trees and the poles, but we do have a little bit of object permanence there because it comes right back up as soon as he's back in. Now we see that red bar going from red to green, or sorry, from green to red, and that's the 15 seconds. And now we've got more people with more detections, and we'll see that go. Okay? All right. Thank you, Jason. So what do we do with this information? Another thing to call it really quick is up in the top right corner of each scenario, there is a test alarm. So whether there's a person there or not, if you're doing your programming, you can come and hit test, and it will activate that as though there was a person that met those, met that criteria in that scene. All right, so we have our scenario 2 set up. Let's set up a scenario 3. Let's do something a little bit different. So we'll do a time in area. We can do next, but this time I want to do cars, buses, trucks, and we'll go with that. Now, let's just say I want this to just be the area out here at front. This is useful in a scenario where we get ride shares that come and they, come to pick people up. We get FedEx or UPS or the, USPS out there, and, they come and they stop. Maybe we want that notification just to give us a heads up that, hey, somebody's out front and, they're loitering out there for whatever reason. Now this van out here, we're going to see if that causes us any kind of a complication. And let's say we'll do the 15 seconds. Maybe they stop for 15 seconds and we get that. The van, because it's present in the scene and not moving, remember we have that 2-second moving requirement, we shouldn't get any alerts or notifications from there. But if a vehicle did come up and park, and they parked, in that spot, because we have that moving, they'd park, we would get that alert on that person. So from this angle, we're going to get some false alerts that maybe we don't want, but what we can get, we'll still get the alerts that we do want. A better camera angle might resolve that or make that look a little bit better. Okay, so what can we do with those two scenarios? We've added them on the camera. That is going to be step one. Set up AOA on the camera first. Now we need to jump over to Milestone. What can we do with this camera in Milestone? Well, before I do anything else, Milestone doesn't know about those scenarios on that camera. So how do we make Milestone know about it? Well, if we set them up and then we add the camera to Milestone, Milestone at that point is going to query the camera and say, hey, what can you do? This camera is already added to Milestone, so we're going to do an update hardware. If you are on an older version of Milestone, you could do a replace hardware as well. That will pull in the updated information. Now, this is going to be a little bit misleading here because it's going to say no changes have been detected. If there was a firmware difference between what Milestone knew and I did a firmware update and then we do an update hardware, it would come back and say, hey, I found a new a new firmware version. But don't be misled just simply by this no changes have been detected. It did detect the changes in AOA. So we can hit confirm. Our management client is going to refresh. Once that comes back up, we'll go back to that camera and there we go. So there's the camera. Now, if we click on the camera itself, the camera device, instead of the hardware, we can go to events. Now, I'm going to remove those ones because they are not there typically by default on a new camera. There are no events. I added those in previous. So what you'll have to do for every camera that you want to leverage event triggers, Milestone needs to be, one, aware that those events exist, that camera has that capability, and two, we have to tell the event server to start to listen for those events. So that's what we're doing here. When we are on the camera device, looking at the event tab, the list here of configured events, these are events that we're telling Milestone to listen for. So you can expand that out. And what you're going to see is a mix of some really long, maybe confusing names mixed in with some of the ones that we've typically seen over the Milestone history, tampering, tripwire, whatever it might be. So in this list, they're sorted alphabetically, but the big long ones are typically going to be those dynamic events that we can pull in from the Axis cameras. ACAP OnVIF event, Axis Image Health Analytics. So we did see earlier that there is on the camera an Axis Image Health Analytics section. That is these events. Okay, and there's an OnVIF variant of that, and then there's a more expanded camera application platform variant of that. If you're using Milestone and an Axis camera, you'd probably want to use the camera application platform instead of the OnVIF versions. But what we're going to do, we're going to scroll down. So we have camera application platform. We have our Axis Image Health coming down the list. We also have Object Analytics. Okay, so here's where we have device one. So if you have a multi-sensor camera that has the capabilities to process AOA on multiple sensors, then you would have a device 1, device 2, device 3, device 4, and so on. And then we have scenario 1, scenario 2. Or actually, let's see here. They may have updated this. Scenario 1, and it tells us Object Analytics Scenario 1. We have a rising and a falling. The rising is going from a there's no detection event to a here's our detection event that meets the criteria we specified, and so now we get that event alert. So we go from a low to a high. That is a rising action. And then when that person leaves or whenever that detection ends, we go from a high to a low. So that is a falling action. So we have the rise and the fall of those two events. Always a recommendation to add both of them. I really wish Milestone would give us the ability to, control click multiple. Unfortunately, there is no control or shift click on these. You can't double click either. Select the one, hit OK, come back in, and come grab the other one. So here we have let's scroll back down to it. There's the Object Analytics Scenario 1 falling. So now we have our Scenario 1 rising and falling. Okay, but we added Scenario 2 and Scenario 3 as well. Scenario 1 was our person detection loitering at the front door, and Scenario 3 was our vehicle loitering at the curb. We have here a device 1 scenario 1, device 1 scenario 1, device 1 scenario, and it just says scenario with device 1 scenario with an ID number, and so random ID numbers. In the past, renaming the cameras, and this is why that recommendation came. I am running the newest version though, 2024 R2 in Milestone, so maybe this has changed between 2024 R1 and R2. In previous versions, if you renamed Scenario 1, you would see Device 1, Scenario 1, and if I changed that name to People, then it would say Device 1, Scenario 1, People. But then in other locations within Milestone where you're looking for that event, that name doesn't track consistently throughout, for example, the events engine or the alarms definitions. Here we see it because this is specific to this camera. The good thing is we do have, here in parentheses, okay, well, what is this? This is Scenario 2, this is Scenario 3. So we're just going to quickly go through and add the rest of those because we want Milestone to listen to all of those events. Now, if you're thinking, hey, this is really cumbersome, I'm going to show you a little bit of a shortcut time-saving factor towards the end. And make sure I grabbed all those correctly. Okay, there is one other. So you'll notice that as we added those, they disappeared off the list. We can check the box to show everything, even those that have been added, but that just, adds to the complexity of trying to find it. There is a Scenario Any. So you could also leverage those as well and say, hey, if there's any kind of scenario that is being triggered on this, I want to know and leverage that as a rule. Here's the thing to keep in mind. When we're looking at the device, these are specific, unique events related to the device. But generally, anywhere else you look inside a Milestone, the reference to these is going to be as a category. So here we might be saying, all right, I like this kind. I want the pizza, but I want the pepperoni pizza. I want the supreme pizza. I want the barbecue chicken pizza, or and then the Scenario Any is going to be, I don't care what kind of pizza it is, as long as it's a pizza, I'll eat it. Okay. In events and alarm definitions, we're going to see how that analogy tracks in other locations to where we're talking about more pizza instead of the specific pizzas. All right, moving on. So yes, we want to save our changes. We have our events added. So now Milestone is aware of what the camera is doing or what the capabilities of the camera are. Milestone is now set to listen for those events. What do we want to do with those events? Well, let's start with a rule. So we will create a new rule. Now, there's a lot of things in here that we can do. The Milestone rules engine is very capable, very versatile. For simplicity, we're going to keep this just very, very simple level. You could do like, hey, if I get a person detected in this area and they've loitered for their 15 seconds, at that point, I want to set off a audio announcement that says, you are loitering, please move on to somewhere else, whatever it might be. You could set off a D4100 siren strobe that's going to play, a loud alarm tone, flash a red and blue light, whatever it might be. lot of options. You could send email notifications. You could drive content to a smart wall. You could say, hey, start recording. Maybe you're not recording based on motion. Maybe you only want to record based on the detection of a person. Wouldn't recommend that necessarily because you might miss things. But there's a lot of options on what you can do. But we're going to keep it simple. And to keep it simple, we're going to, I do have to wait for this to query all of, compile the list of possible events and then display it. So it does take just a second to come up. But what we're going to do, just for simplicity, is I'm going to use a webhook. Starting in XProtect 2023 R1, Milestone introduced webhooks. And this is in the context of I'm going to send a Milestone event out to a webhook receiver. Now, I don't have any webhook receivers on-prem, but if you ever want to test it, I found this really cool site called webhook.site. And when you go there, it'll generate a unique webhook URL for you, and you can use that URL to send events, Milestone events to. And then what that lets us do is see what that event data looks like. So we're going to leverage that. Once this comes up, we will select our webhook as our action. This is taking particularly longer than normal this morning. Maybe because it's the first time I've done it today. Oops, where'd it go? Here it is. It moved to another screen, as did the rules. Anyway, we'll get that back. All right, so here's our events. Select an event. There's a lot in here that can be used as triggers. There's hardware events that are both configurable and predefined. We've gone through these before, and we'll go through them more extensively in another session. But what we're looking for right now, this is a device event. Remember, it's tied to the camera. So we want the device, and it's a configurable event. Now, here in this list, we have, again, a lot of those same kind of long, who knows what they are names. So here's the OnVIF variant of the image health analytics. We're going to scroll down. We want to go down to camera application platform. And on this camera application platform, we're looking for here's our image health. We'll keep going down. We've got audio detection, a whole bunch. This is showing us all the events from everything across the system. And so there's a lot in here. Okay, here's our object analytics. And now you can see device 1, scenario 1 falling, device 1, scenario 1 rising, device 1, scenario 2. And apparently at one point I did name one of these speeding vehicle. So I have a scenario 2 somewhere that's called speeding people or speeding vehicle. I have a scenario 2 somewhere, or scenario 3 somewhere called people, and a scenario 4 somewhere called cars. We do have as well these additional ones. So they actually have provided some updates, I think, on this. Because you used to not get the duplicates. You used to only get one scenario 1, one scenario 2, one scenario 3. All right, we'll see what this does. Fun experiments, learning process all the time. So device 1, scenario 1, we're going to first work on our person. When there is a person loitering, what are we going to do? So when there is a person loitering, that was our device 1, scenario 2. And on the rising of that, so when we go from there's nobody to we have that activation, we're going to select that as our event trigger. So this is the category of the scenario, not necessarily the specific event, but what device do we care about that event from? This is where we pair the two together. Okay, so we'll say all cameras, and that is the exterior front door sidewalk camera. It's an Axis Q3536. Click OK. So that's our trigger event. Any conditions we want to set on there? Do we want this to be only within business hours or maybe only outside of business hours? For this case, we'll just do always. All right. What do we want that to do? Start recording, set a smart wall preset. Again, just to keep it simple, I'm going to come down and I'm going to select send event information to webhook, and then I can select my webhook, which I already have added in here, and we can say OK and hit next. Is there any stop criteria? You can set that if it's required or if you want, and we need to give it a name. Please name your rules. Generally do it first so you don't forget. I didn't do that this time around, but we're going to call this. So I like to kind of sort my rules based on what they are. This is a rule leveraging AOA. So I'm going to say AOA and person loitering at front door. You can add a description there if you need more information to reference. Hit finish, and we have our event. We have our rule. Okay. So let's shift back over to our web pages, and we're going to pull the webhooks guy off to one side, and we're going to come over to AOA, and we're going to test. So we only were doing scenario 2. So if I come to scenario 1 and I say test alarm, we don't get any event coming in because it didn't match the criteria that we had specified. Let me go back, hit scenario 2. Now I'm going to say test alarm, and we should now see an event come in to our webhook. Now the one thing I didn't check is the webhook URL still the same from what I used yesterday? It might have shifted. Let's come check that out. So little behind the scenes peek at what that looks like. We'll hit save and come back to here. All right, so let's hit test again. And if this doesn't work, we're going to be doing some troubleshooting to see what we missed. So we're on the right camera and we have our area defined. Let's come back to Milestone. Let's go to that camera. We have the camera. We have the event. We have our events specific, rising and falling. They are enabled. That is something to check because sometimes events, generally they pull in enabled, but sometimes the events do pull in disabled. Okay. And let's come back to our rule and let's make sure that our rule is making sense. So perform an action on camera application platform, object analytics, device 1, scenario with the custom number. But we clarified that that is object analytics scenario 2 and on the rising from this event. Okay, so everything's lined up. It should be going. And our rule is active. All right, so let's do this. This is a really great troubleshooting step. We're going to add in an additional action. We want to send a, nope, not send a, we want to make a new log entry. So we'll say log entry, device name, event name, and we'll add that. So now what we can do is we can come to our server logs, rule triggered logs, come back to our interface, and we can hit test alarm. We should get our event. Let's check our event logs, see if we have any rule triggered logs for the last hour, and we do not. Okay, we're going to jump to something I was going to save for later, but it's functional in a troubleshooting scenario. If you install Access Optimizer, you would need it on the management server, and you would also need it on the workstation where you are running your management client. So here I'm running my management client on my actual desktop. Access Events is one of those tools that comes with Access Optimizer. And what this is doing is it's telling us all of our events that we have active and also all of the events that are not active. And so when we talk later about the bulk capabilities, we're going to come back to this. But right now what we're going to do is we can expand these out, and we can see that for the device 1 scenario 1, we have 10 cameras or so added, and we can see the state of when these last triggered. So right now on the front door sidewalk, we have that, just barely triggered the detection of anything, because we have that one as our people and vehicle and everything. Okay, if we come down, so here we have scenario 2 and scenario 3, and then we have a scenario 2 and an any. This is the any, and scenario 2, scenario 3, scenario 2. This is on the lobby. So these are the ones specifically that we're going to look at. So to test if the event is coming into Milestone, this is another way to check. Hey, is the event coming into Milestone? So we're going to come and trigger the test alarm. Okay. We see it turn red, so we know that the test is being triggered. All right, let's come back to our management client. And we do see here exterior front door sidewalk, scenario 2 rising just now. So we do know that the event is coming into Milestone. Milestone is detecting it. So if we come back to our rule triggered logs, look at the last hour, we're not getting it. So there's something wrong with our rule. Let's go to edit rule, and let's look at, the only things we can really investigate are what's triggering it. So let's go to the trigger and see if maybe I selected the wrong one, or we'll see what we've got. While that's pulling up, I want to check as well. Maybe I selected scenario 3. Let me test that one. That turns red, but still no event. Okay, we'll just give this a moment, wait for that event list to pull up. To answer the question in the chat, when we were talking about adding the events to the camera device, only being able to do them one at a time. That is a good suggestion. If you click on the icon, can you select multiple? And the answer to that is no. Unfortunately, there's just not a way that Milestone has given us to select multiple from that list. Maybe that was intentional to keep people from just like adding everything from the whole list. That could get kind of muddy for your event server, I would bet. Or maybe there's some other reason, I don't know. If you have any other questions as well, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We do have a Q&A section turned on, so you can drop them there as well, and we can reference that for Q&A. Okay, so let's see. We selected device 1, scenario custom ID, object analytics, scenario 2, rising. That should have been the one we were looking for. We do have let's try this one, device 1, scenario 2, rising. See, that's the one labeled speeding vehicle, which isn't the speeding vehicle. We also have the scenario 3, scenario 4, and then device any device, any scenario. And those are the ones we have. Let's try this and see if we get any kind of a different result. Okay, so let's come back, and we are going to go to scenario 2, and we will test the alarm. Come back here, we will go to our server logs, rule triggered logs, and the last hour, and still nothing popping up there. So something is interfering with the event coming into Milestone and being processed against the right rule. I wonder if, standby. Let me try one thing here off to the side. See if my event server is throwing any errors. All right, while I'm working with this, take a moment to think about some of the ways that you can use object analytics. Some of the ways that we've seen and deployed out in the field. We have a customer that has a warehouse. This warehouse is exposed all the way around, on even along all like the dock doors and ramps and everything like that. They don't have a way of limiting or restricting access to that area. So their security perimeter starts at the walls of their building. And so when they have, semis parked out there with trailers, they were having people come break into the trailers, siphon fuel out of the diesel truck tanks, or drill holes in the tank to get the fuel out, and then and they were cutting out catalytic converters. So one thing that we did to help combat that is, along the length of the building, we installed cameras with object analytic capabilities. Those cameras are watching the area, and we have 2 or 3 different scenarios. I'm not sure where we landed on it in final programming, but as a person approaches, kind of moves out of the center aisle into their ramp space, we start detecting the presence of a vehicle. If that vehicle stops and loiters, we can action on that. We can start turning on some strobes. If we detect a person within that area, then we can start playing back messages. Hey, you're trespassing, you're in a restricted area, please leave. As they dwell or as they approach the building and get closer, we could use a second scenario as a new zone. And in that zone, we can then get more aggressive in our notifications. We can start to play a really loud, D4100 siren strobe. We can flash the lights red and blue. We can do a lot of different things. We can change the messaging to, you've been warned, the police have been notified and are on their way, whatever the scenario might be. Okay, let's see if we get a different result. I rebooted my event server just to see if that was something kicking that there. And let's go back to the server logs. So that's one option, one possible scenario. We have other customers using it for, hey, I've got a stairwell. It's just it's an emergency exit. It's not something we get a lot of people in, but yet for some reason we have, people that go and they hang out down there. Whether drugs become a problem. People using the bathroom in the corner becomes a problem in these stairwells, and that it just makes the area really gross. And so we can set up a camera that watches, the area around the bottom of that stairwell, particularly underneath where you can kind of go and hide. And if there's a person that loiters there for more than 60 seconds or whatever it might be, we can send a notification to their dispatch, or we can send a notification to security staff. We could send a notification. We could play a message in that area, informing them that they need to leave. A lot of options there. I've set it up so that, for example, when we have ISC West here in Las Vegas, we run shuttles between ISC West and the Global Technology Center in Vegas. And so we do, with that shuttle, I can set up a message, based on a time schedule that plays throughout the building that says, the next shuttle should be arriving soon. That's done on a schedule because they rotate every 30 minutes. When the shuttle arrives, I can do a AOA detection of a black bus. Yes, I did call out the color. We'll look at that in a moment. But a black bus sitting out front. And then I can use the presence of that bus, loitering for 10, 15 seconds, whatever, to then notify, play a message internal that says the bus has arrived or the shuttle has arrived. With the people detection, vehicle detection, if you have a yard or an area of your property that you want to be, there shouldn't be anybody out there at night, right? And so in the past, we've set up motion alerts like, hey, if there's motion out here, we want to do this thing. Well, just based on motion alone, we would get a lot of false positives, given that, a cat walking through the scene, and cats are everywhere. There's no keeping a cat off your property. But you could get, a piece of garbage or some leaves blowing across the scene, and that would trigger the motion event. Well, now with AOA, we can say, hey, don't do that based on motion. Do that based on the detection of a person inside this area. So that's another good application of it. All right, let's go back to our scenario 2, device 1. So we have 2 of them here that are scenario 2. So I'm not sure which is which. Let me see if these used to be more treated like a category than individual events. And so this may have been a recent change that Milestone made. We'll pull this up in a separate window so I don't have to wait for this event screen to load again. What I'm going to look at is that custom ID now on that camera. Come on, there we go. Move that over. Okay, so we want to go to cameras. All cameras, and then exterior, front, door, and sidewalk. And then we can go to events, and it is calling out which one is scenario 2? Scenario 2 is the 721648. 721648 rising, and let's try that. All right, come back here. We've got the event, test alarm. Well, I am not sure why that is not doing what I want it to. That's not what I want. Server logs, audit logs, last hour to refresh, and there's no log entries. Well, let's try one other thing here. Let's come back to our recording server, and let's try another update hardware and see what we get out of that. Otherwise, we'll adapt and just keep moving forward. Go back to the camera. We'll check the events, make sure the events are there after the update hardware. Okay. Come here to the camera. Now, just to point out, if you go to the hardware and events, there aren't any configurable with an Axis camera, so the add button is grayed out. But when we go to the camera device, then we have the add showing there. Okay, so we've got the OnVIF, that's only the image health. We have audio control. We have application camera platform. And just to make sure we don't pop up anything anywhere else, because it's always been that camera application platform. Yep. Okay, so camera application platform. We already have several added, so we'll see a shorter list. And we don't have any more object analytics there. Just the external data one. And that's it. So we have added our events, and they are all enabled. And the scenario 2 is this 721648. And if we go back to our rules, and we have 721648, and we are doing on the rising from that camera, create a log entry, send event to webhook. That should be getting it. And I do not know why it doesn't. I did do a demo call just yesterday with this, and it worked flawlessly. So I will have to dig into this and probably come out with an addendum to this training when we get it uploaded to YouTube. But let's continue to move through some of the different options here. Let's look at the bulk options because that's a great time to point this out. So remember how on the camera, when we were adding the events, well, we have the events, but then there's another setting as well. So what we want to do is actually, this might be why it's not coming in. Let's go to metadata and search. Nope, because I had already turned these on. So this, again, this is part of Access Optimizer. So this is how we configure what data we want to come into Milestone. Do we want the event data? Do we want the analytics data? And this takes a moment to populate. I'll actually do this. Let's come over here. And while that's populating, let's come back up to the Access Events. Access Events and Access Actions are really handy. In the Access Actions, you can create presets. So if there's a particular siren strobe profile you want to create, you can define that preset, you pair it to the strobe, and then in your rules, it really simplifies how you can trigger that event inside the rules. But inside the Access Events, once this loads up, we've got, this is really good for monitoring what's going on. In the not active section, so we'll come down, and here's our ACAP ONVIF. We keep coming down to the, keep going. We might have, oh, there they are. So Camera Application Platform. Here's Access Image Health Analytics. So any of these, you could come in and add devices. So we can say any event, and here's all the devices where we can turn that on. Same thing, we can do that. Coming further down, we have Camera Application Platform. We've got a couple other different, okay, so Object Analytics, Device 1, Scenario 2, add devices. We can add those devices. So it's a lot easier to come in and check these boxes than it is to go through camera by camera, adding in one at a time. So we can enable these events inside of our Milestone with ease. Now, I mean, if you've got thousands of cameras, it is still a chore, but it's a lot better than the alternatives. Okay, so that's an easy way to add those events. So again, this is the part where we added the event that we wanted Milestone to listen to that camera hardware, or sorry, to the camera device. You'll see that it is currently syncing the connection states with those. And when we refresh this, they will move down here from the not added section up to the added section. And so they'll all appear up here at the top. We've got those. We've got the front door sidewalk on the scenario 1, which is rising. We've got detections out on our trash storage area. Let's see if there's any others we can add to the scenario 1. Quite a few. So we can go and add very quickly all of the devices. You can also, if you want to be super fast and use keyboard shortcuts, once you click one, you can now use the arrow key down, spacebar, arrow key down, spacebar, and you can go through those a lot faster. Add devices. We'll add those all. We can add more to the any. And this is just going to basically preface your, preload your system so that all the events that you might possibly want related to Access Object Analytics are already there. Now, whether you leverage them or not, that's a different question. Okay. All right. So for our device 1, scenario 1, Let's shorten these again. So we have these guys, and then we had some other scenario 2s down here. Okay. And that's the south rear drive. So I wonder if there's an update to Axis Optimizer. Maybe I'm in a weird bug spot right now. All right. Well, we're going to keep moving on anyway. So we looked at the scenario of we want to, do a loitering detection just right here at the front door. We have a loitering detection for only vehicles right out here at the curb. We could add in some others. Let me go to a different camera. The hard hat one's kind of fun to look at. So let's go to the warehouse camera, and we're going to, this one. So analytics, object analytics, open. So we have our scenario 1. Let's add a scenario 2 for PPE monitoring. It does call out. This option is currently in beta, meaning it has complete functionality, but may require further refinement based on field feedback before its official release. You can read more about the specific Axis beta features. All right, we'll do it across the whole area and finish. And now if we come and we open that, we can actually watch. We've got a guy out there right now. We've got 2 guys out there right now. Let's see if we get a hard hat or a lack of a hard hat detection. They're both wearing, ball caps, and there we go. On both of them, we get that lack of hard hat detection. So this would be coming into Milestone. This would be a scenario 2 event that we would tie to this camera and run that way. To warehouse, maybe it would be good to know if we get any vehicles in the warehouse. A vehicle inside the warehouse could be an okay thing, or maybe that turns out to be a not good thing. We can scope that. We can leave it wide, the whole scene, all the options there. Another one, let's see. Let's look at the cross-line options. And is this a good camera to do? Oh, no. So another scenario that we are implementing this in, and this is actually the one that I was testing yesterday, is if you have IDF closets and you're part of the IT group, you might want to know when somebody's in your IDF closet. And so what we did is we did the object analytics. We have the one scenario, and we did the... Now, I don't necessarily have to add in a new scenario just for people in here, because we already have that being done in scenario 1. And I'm concerned about everything in this scene. All right, so let's look at this camera. We'll run it here. So first thing we need to do, let's make sure that the camera has the event. So that's this one right here, this P3267. We don't have any configured events. If we click add, let's see what it's aware of. It is aware of a scenario 1 rising and falling. That's great, because that's what we're using. So let's add in the rising. Let's add in the falling. Object analytics, device 1, scenario 1 falling. Okay, they're both enabled. We'll hit save. Now, maybe my management client is out of sync. Let's hit refresh. Go back and check, make sure our changes saved. So all cameras, and it was this camera and event. Okay, so we do have those events already there. We have the scenario 1 and we have the any scenario all there. That probably got out of sync because we leveraged the bulk tool to do that with the Axis events, and so We didn't refresh the smart client after we did that to see those events populate here. Because keep in mind, like your smart client, everything in your management client is queried at the beginning when you log in. And so unless you right click, and refresh, it doesn't requery additional information from that point. All right, let's go to the Axis events. And what I want to do is find that event in the list, and then we will manually trigger the alarm, and we'll see if that hits the Axis events list. While that's loading, let's come back over to no, I don't want to jump ahead to that yet. We'll come back. We'll just wait a moment. Okay, so here we have device 1, scenario 1, and it's across all these cameras. Let's find our server room. It's this one right here. All right, let's toggle back over to the camera, and we will test. We'll see this flash red. We should see it flash red. Let's see if we do get a detection. So here it is showing just now. Server room, northwest corner, and we had that just now detection on the scenario 1. All right, we're gonna try this again. Let's see if we get a different behavior out of a scenario 1 than the other options. Perform an action on, let's give it a name. So AOA, person in IDF closet. Perform an action on event. Let's pick our event. Wait for our list to load here. Once this loads, we're going to finish building out the rule. And what we're going to do is we're going to build the rule 2 on that scenario 1 detection for that particular IDF closet camera. Then we want to do a thing, and we'll select our webhook again. We'll also add in the log, create a log entry event so that we have a second verification there. Okay. And then I think we will shift over to the bulk operations and finish looking at that. And if you've got any questions along the way, please drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll go. Oh, yes, there are some. Take a moment to look at those too. Okay, so here we have our list. So again, we're going to go to devices. It is a configurable event. I'm going to scroll down to camera application platform, and we want the object analytics scenario 1 rising. Click OK. Which device do we want this from? Now we could, if we wanted this level or this many alerts, we could say just scenario 1 across all of the cameras. We would get the results there. Okay, but here we're going to specify the server room, and we'll add in the camera that we set that up on. Now, in this example, I do have 2 cameras in my IDF closet. If I added both cameras, I'm going to get 2 alerts anytime a person walks through the door, because both cameras can see the door. I don't want the double alerts, and so I'm not going to do that. Let's see. Yep. So just do that always. And we want to come down. We want to create a log entry. We'll do device name, event name, and we want to send event information to webhook, and we'll select the webhook that we're monitoring and finish. All right, so we have the rule, we have the everything's set up again. Let's see if we have any different luck. Let's pull this guy over and put, nope, not you. Pull you back up there. All right, let's hit test alarm. We see the red screen. We can come to here, go to server logs, rule triggered logs, check for the last hour. No. All right. Well, I can definitely confirm that there is something broken. And oh, hey, look, we got one. There we go. We finally got one from the server room. All right. Now let's go look at that event data in here. It did not go out to the webhook. Could be an issue with the webhook I have selected, although we did update it. All right. Well, we see that we have the triggering alert. Once we can verify, yes, it came into Milestone. We verified Milestone received it through that log entry. That's confirmed to be working. So from there, it's just a matter of customizing what we want the actions to be, the result of those things to be. All right. Let's look now at this. We started pulling up. This is the Axis Optimizer, metadata, and search. This takes a moment to populate, but if you ever are like, what can my cameras do? This is a place to reference it. And this is very specifically tied as well to when I come to search and I have my cameras, what am I searching for? So we have container search. These options are added when Axis Optimizer is installed. So we have container search, forensic search, and vehicle search, and speed zone search. So we have those four that Axis adds. Okay. You'll notice here on the Axis search categories, we have those same four categories, and I can toggle some on or off. So if I don't have anything running, detection on containers, I can turn off the container search. We don't have to have that showing. Vehicle search, we can turn off on or off different parts of the vehicle search. Okay, so event data. Do we want the VMS to retrieve event data from the device? So you need this for several features in Axis Optimizer. Analytics data, turn on to use the forensic search feature and show bounding boxes in live streams and recordings. And as I scroll down, so you can turn it on for some or all. You'll see that it's turned on for all. If we go to that front, well, I'd have to look at what that was. I think that was this guy here, the front camera we were looking at. It's one of those two. It's turned on. Now, this is something really important. Some device, you can see I have a mix here. So devices that don't have this selection of icons or colored icons, right? All I'm doing is like motion-based, the general detection of a shape or a moving object, okay? Everything should pretty much do that at a minimum. Some of them I have just the icons, so this device detects moving humans and different vehicle types, okay? There's that, but I don't have any color selections in there. Here on the one below it, I have this detects moving humans, including clothing color, and different vehicle types, including color. So our icons are telling us what we can detect. Now, this radar fusion camera, this Q1656, has one additional on there where it adds object speed into that. All right, so it tells you what there is. Now, there's one fourth column here called consolidated metadata. And I'll read what it says. Consolidated metadata turn on to improve the speed of the forensic search. Consolidated metadata replaces video analytics streams with summarized analytics data. It does require a firmware version of 11.10 or later on the camera. Note that bounding boxes in live view and playback and the VMS built-in search options are not available in this mode. So if you use consolidated metadata, you won't have bounding boxes. But it is going to speed up your search. And the reason why is because that analytics data that's coming in, it's a constant stream of there's a vehicle, there's a person, there's something, and it moved just this little bit, and it moved just this little bit. And so it's a big, long stream of information. When we consolidate that, it's going to remove a lot of the redundant or unnecessary information, and it's just going to make our database, our metadata database, smaller so that it searches faster. So I'm going to show you what that search looks like. So right now, we'll clear the list, and we'll just say, show me the last, 6 hours. All right. Now we're going to add in our cameras. So what cameras do we want to select? I'll just say all cameras. There's 102 in here right now. So we've got all cameras across 102. Now it's coming up with a ton of results for the last 6 hours. There's 11,255 different types of results. So we want to tell it what we want to search for. We're going to come to forensic search, and we'll hit new search. Now we can filter. So just show me humans. Okay. And we'll start to get our human results. I can make my thumbnails larger here. And I might pare this down to the last 2 hours just so that it's less to work with. I am asking my computer to do a lot right now. It's recording multiple video streams and the YouTube meeting, the Teams meeting and a bunch. So it is being a little stretched. Last 2 hours, okay. And maybe let's pick a smaller subset of cameras. Let's do our exterior. Let's add in the intercom and the front radar. And let's add in the back panorama. And that one. And the radar. And then we'll do these. And the PTZ. And that. Okay, we'll call that. And let's add in some interior as well. So let's do the interior. The lobby's a great place. So corner, entry, front door, healthcare. We'll add in all the lobby. Okay, so we're taking all of our results and we're basically turning it into show me only humans. So there's a human. There's another human. There's humans clear out here in the parking lot by this vehicle. There's a human standing across the road. Another human. All right. Let's change our search to vehicles. Get rid of the humans. And let's add in a vehicle color. Show me only red vehicles. I don't know if we have red vehicles around here. Let's see what we get. So the bounding box is way up here in the corner. That's a little off in the distance. Had a red vehicle fly down the road there. Let's look on this camera. That is a red truck driving by. Anyway, so you can see how the metadata starts to bring in addition. Yeah, so look, that's a red car way off out there in the distance. You can start to see how the metadata brings in, just bringing that additional data from Axis Object Analytics is going to expand our capabilities within our Milestone system quite a bit. Okay, let's see. Let's look at some of the other bulk options. So we looked at the metadata and search, turning on those options there. We looked at the Axis events, turning on that information there. There's two other tools I want to show you for some of the Milestone bulk thing, the Axis bulk things. One of them is Axis Device Manager. Now, when we're talking about metadata, time sync becomes something that's important. We need our cameras to be NTP synced because the metadata in its raw form contains timestamps in it. And actually, that could be, now that I think about it, let's come back here, status. Okay, that camera is time synced. I was suspecting maybe we had an issue with the time sync, and maybe that's why we weren't getting those events. But so within Access Device Manager, as we talk about what can we do with AOA, there's two things with AOA that tie into Access Device Manager. One is we can select all the cameras and we can do a set date and time, and we can specify our time zone as well as the NTP server if we want to, we can set that here. We can also do our firmware updates. And so you see up in the top left, it says new firmware versions exist for 13 devices. I can hit continue. It's going to take my list of devices and retrieve the firmwares from Access's website. And it's going to tell me what needs firmware. So here I've got a Q3536 that is on 12.2.52, and there is a 12.2.62. So I could check the box on that and do the others and click OK, and it will go and process all those firmware updates. Okay, now unfortunately in Access Device Manager, there's not a way to control apps, like which apps are running. You can install apps and deploy apps across the cameras in bulk, but there's no app control, like to turn on or start an app. But we can do that through Access Device Manager Extend. Now, Access Device Manager Extend does need licensing to run. But what we get is we get a dashboard showing our devices. So I have 2 devices that are currently unreachable out of my 76 Access devices. There's one new discovered device that hasn't been adopted yet. All my edge hosts are online. The edge host is it's a tiny little application that installs, typically we put it on the Milestone server, and it gets us that cloud connection to the Milestone server, and then the Milestone server can talk out all to all the cameras, and that's what gives us that communication. So Access Device Manager Extend, yes, is a cloud platform that takes an on-prem agent to make the connections to the devices. We can see that all devices are running recommended Access OS versions, and nothing has a default root password. And this is really handy as well. We can see how the warranty spread on devices, as well as we've got 5 devices with expired warranties. I can click on that and it'll pull up the list of those 5 devices. But if I go to my edge host and then I go click into that edge host, and then I go to devices attached to that edge host, I can select all the devices, and I have a button here for apps. So I can install an app, or I can go to app options. And through this app options, we can see all of the apps that are installed on the cameras that I selected. Come down the list, and we can see that we have Access Object Analytics. It is running on 28 devices. Now I can stop that app and hit apply, and Access Device Manager Extend will stop all the apps on there. So if you haven't turned on Object Analytics on all of your cameras, this is an easy way to do it across everything, as opposed to having to go through one by one to each camera to turn on that app. If you're of the scripting mind, I'm sure there's a way to write a script that would leverage the Vapix commands to do that. But that would be an adventure on its own for sure. Okay. As well as here inside of Access Device Manager, so we can also upgrade firmware. We can also, we can set policy. So as we add devices, it will enforce a policy. That policy can include install this app and always turn it on. It could include things like, we can just look at some of the options. Let's go to my default app policy. So we can turn on, specific apps. We can, let's see, that's the app policy. I want the security policy. On the security policy, we can set a device root password. We can turn off anonymous access. We can turn off UPnP, SSH, FTP. We can turn on system access logging. We can force whatever authentication is. Lots of different options there. Bonjour, SSDP, zero config. We can command all those there. And then any devices that we enroll in Access Device Manager Extend inherit that policy, and then all of those settings are automatically applied to those. So that's really handy as we start to have to manage a lot more devices. And then if we go over to the devices section outside of the Edge hosts, we can select all the cameras, and here we can export this list as a CSV, or I can do some light device configuration. I can add overlays if I wanted to, or we can do date and time settings, set the time zone and the NTP servers. So that's what we have in terms of bulk options. All right. Let me look through the Q&A here and see if there's any. So, how could I send a notification to a computer as an alarm with this loitering detection? That is a great question. Okay, and I did skip over that part unintentionally, so thank you for calling that back up. Okay, so we looked at the rules engine. Now, rules engine is very much a, if this happens, do this, but there are some limits on what we can do. Let's actually go to edit the rule, and if we look back at our step 3, which is actions, the actions of driving information to specific people, workstations, or groups is maybe a little limited. These are kind of more on the like system-wide actions, or what is the system going to do. You could, if you're leveraging SmartWall, you can drive content, video, messages to the SmartWall. You could recall a SmartWall preset. You could put that camera up on the SmartWall. Now, SmartWall is generally intended for the scenario where you have I'll show you. Let me go here. I'll show you what the SmartWall looks like. And let me find a camera. And let's just do this, PTZ. And I want this showroom, not the lobby, not the outside, show more. Showroom, we'll do this guy here. Okay, this is a SmartWall. So I have running this SmartWall, I have two computers. One computer is running the 4 TVs and another computer is running the projector. But we leverage SmartWall to drive content to these displays. There is no mouse or keyboard attached to these computers. And so now that's their traditional usage. To kind of loop back to your answer, you can leverage SmartWall locally as well. Like, I don't have to have it up on a wall. I can have a secondary view of a SmartWall, and I use that on my screen. For example, if I expand out my SmartWall section, here's the showroom wall. I have one called SOC Workstation. So I could just have this as a view, and Milestone can be driving content to my view. So I can have that open on a secondary window or whatever it might be. So that's one option. Okay. The other option is using Milestone's Alarm Manager. So let's go back and let's finish looking through these a little bit. Our other options for notifying people through the rules engine would be things like we can do an audio message. We could do a siren strobe flashing. We can do emails. So that would be here under the send notification to profile. We can do emails. Because we can do emails, we can also send SMS or MMS messages as an email. Note that caveat, because it's not the same necessarily as pulling up your friend and texting, pulling up your phone and texting your friend, because it is an email being sent to your phone, so it shows up in your messaging app, but it's being sent to your phone as an email. But we can also include images in that as well, so that can be useful. And that's kind of the limit of it there. We have the webhooks. Outside of that, what we want to do is we want to leverage alarm definitions. And I don't want to dig into alarm definitions too much because it can be a big, hour-long thing all on its own. But what we can do is we can add a new alarm definition, and we'll just mock up one, and we will do person in IDF. And we will select our triggering event. Okay, so it's a device event. And what is our device event? So we want the camera application platform, and we're going to come down to object analytics. And we want that scenario 1 rising. Okay, from what source? So again, this should feel very similar to the rules engine. So far, it's kind of all that same approach. All right, let's come down the list once it finishes loading the list. There it goes to that camera there. Okay, so when this event happens, we want to create this alarm. Who is this alarm for? So, well, we'll keep going down the list. Time profile always, or scope it to a time. Is there a map tied to this? There is. This camera is on a smart map, so we'll leverage that. Operator action required. So this means that when the alarm is generated, if people ignore it for more than a minute, then I want to do this event. So I could have the alarm come in, and if they ignore it for more than a minute, I could make a siren strobe go off or a audio announcement. Related cameras, initial alarm owner will say that I own it, and it is a high priority with an alarm category of emergency alert. These are all customizable and definable. And then events triggered by the alarm. The alarm itself could trigger an event automatically, or we can do that same behavior through a rule. Hit save. All right, let's minimize that. Come back to the smart client. We've got our alarm manager. Let's come here and come back to the IDF, which was this guy. So now we'll hit test alarm, and we'll see if this works. There it goes. So we have now an alert that came in. Now this alert can be set to create a pop-up in the bottom left corner of your screen. It did come up on mine, but it came up on another monitor, so it didn't show on the Teams call. But this gives us a running list of events that people can look at. And again, it's also permission based. So if you don't have the permissions to see this event, you're not going to see this event. But what this is telling us is it shows the camera. So we get the map location of where that event is. We also see the camera feed at the timestamp of that event. So if there was a person in there, we would have that showing the video of the person coming in. I just did the test event feature, so there is no person. From here, we can acknowledge these or close them or set them on hold or whatever we need to do or want to do. So that is kind of the way that we send notifications to computers. To phrase it that way is we leverage the alarm manager to do that. And then, so to have an event trigger an output, if we wanted to do that, so let's come back up to the rules engine, and we'll use this. We'll look at that one. So we'll edit the rule. Here on the actions, we would use something like set device output to state. So, okay, what do we want? We want to activate that output. Okay, what output do we want to activate? So we can say, all right, I want to activate the output on, it could be, we could do it on a D4100 and then have the D4100 with a rule that says when I see this activated, do this thing. I'll show you a better way to do that. We could also say, if it's actually like an output tied, physical I/O. So for example, if we go to that front door camera, which was the, that is the Q6536 out front, 3536 out front. Okay. Now I don't have any of my outputs enabled right now, but you would say, take my output 1 and add it. And now you see that we have set output immediately to activated. Now, when we activate outputs, we might want to also do something to deactivate the output after a set time or after an event. And so we could say after, 5 minutes or 10 seconds, we'll say 1 minute, what do we want to do? Go to the stop action events, and we could say we want to set device output to state deactivated. And you can see it kind of pre-fills some of that information in as you turn on the options. And so here on this rule, when we have our Axis Object Analytics detection, we're going to, from this camera, we're going to set the device output to activated. We're going to create a log entry, and we're going to send information to the webhook site. And after 1 minute, we're going to deactivate the output, is basically how that runs. Okay, there's another option here. Let's go back to edit that rule more. If we come further down, we can start a plugin on a device. I haven't seen that one used really. Another one is we can move PTZs to presets. So we can move, if there's a neighboring PTZ and we want a second view of that camera, we can command that PTZ to move. The one that's easier that I wanted to show you is with Axis Optimizer installed, you get these additional rules. So, and they're all prefaced with Axis. So run operator control, play audio clip, turn on or off radar, start door station call. We can dry a camera, for the PTZ cameras that are, the teardrop shape, we can shake that camera to dry the lens. We can run an autofocus. We can start or stop a profile on a siren strobe. So this might be one that's used, as well as audio clips. So what we do is those get added to the list, and you'll notice that it says preset. So I don't have any presets defined here, but in the presets, you would then select the preset, and I'll show you again where we set those presets. But same thing for the start or stop a profile on siren. You would select the preset and then have that preset selected there. Okay, so let me show you those presets. Remember we talked about this Axis actions, where we can define those presets. So that is here. So we could say a strobe preset. We would create a new preset. We want to select the siren strobe that we want. Now this leverages the, I believe it's input 1 on the device. So input 1 on the device has to be activated in order for this to happen. But select the siren strobe, so that's my D4100s, and we can expand out my list of D4100s. And I have one here for the warehouse dock. So we can say the warehouse dock, and you'll notice it is output 1, so we can add output 1. Okay, what do we want this one to do? It's loading the profiles that are right now on that D4100. And we can define this then as the preset. And then in our rules, we would select that preset. So I might not have any defined on there. Let's remove that one. Anyway, so that's how that works there. You define the preset. Okay, let's see. Any documentation or video tutorials on adding Axis Optimizer to Milestone? It is very simply just a download the installer from Axis's website. And it's pretty easy to find. You can just go to axis.com and search there, or you can just search for Axis Optimizer. And it's generally the top one that comes up. It's a free download. You can download it. And current version is 5.3. Once you get that download, you'll need to install it on your management server, and then wherever you want to use your management client, you'll need to download it there as well, and then install. And it just runs you through the prompts on your management server. Well, specifically, it's talking to your event server. So Axis Optimizer needs to be installed wherever your event server is. That's a good clarification to make. It will need to stop your event server and then start your event server in order for that to take effect. So just know that happens. But it's a prompt. I think there's 3 options to click through, and it's pretty straightforward. So, okay. If there's any other questions, let's see. I think we've covered everything. At least I'm seeing. My apologies if I'm missing something. But yeah, I will have to try to figure out what's going on with some of my AOA rules and why they're not functioning. Like I said, when I tested this all yesterday, it worked flawlessly the first time without any issue. Something's being weird in my system today. Go figure. That's how it goes. But again, kind of general overview. Set up AOA on the camera. Milestone needs to know about that scenario and the capabilities of AOA. So we want to do that update hardware or replace hardware in order for those events to then populate in the list. And then we want to add those, enable those events on the camera, like inside Milestone for that camera, so that Milestone knows to listen for those events. And then we can start to leverage those in rules and alarms. And bulk tools to help us through that process is Access Optimizer. And we can specifically, we want to use the metadata and search and the access events to get everything set up for us to use for those. So, but that's a lot to cover. Again, my apologies that not everything worked quite the way that I wanted it to, but it does work consistently and it does work well. The countless systems that we've set this up on, personally, I've done it on several. I have not had the issues we had today. So don't be discouraged by that at all. But yeah, it's a fun thing to play with and definitely adds a lot of capability to your system. The search features that come from AOA are amazing. The ability to get better, more accurate alerts on, hey, there's a person where they shouldn't be, instead of doing that based on motion. So every little light flicker or a shadow or whatever causing issues, we can do that just off of the specific triggers that we want, a person or a vehicle. If you could do a vehicle going the wrong direction as well. So if we go back to our scenarios, let's pick this outside one, and it's object analytics. So we could do a object that is crossing a line. So we could say here, we could say only show me cars or vehicles. Maybe we don't care about motorcycles or bikes, anything. The other is kind of just like a get everything else category. So we could say if I have vehicles crossing maybe the wrong way through an area, maybe I want to know and get a notification on that. We can change the direction. Now this is just one direction or the other direction. We can't set it up for both, but you could set up a second, an additional scenario for the other direction if you want to do that. We also have the cross-line counting. So we could say only count humans, maybe that cross the sidewalk here, and we want to only know going the one direction. We could reset the counts at midnight. We could set thresholds, counting intervals, change the direction, different things. So there are some counting features coming into here. The webhooks functionality with some of the counting stuff, the webhook data, the counts should pass through the webhook. So if you want to leverage those actual numbers in some way, then you can do that through the webhooks. And Access is working on revamping their people counting solution right now. Historically, that's been a camera over a doorway or a walkway facing straight down with a line detection. You're counting as people cross there. With object analytics and being able to detect people, we should be able to morph that into people, like a holistic people counting solution like Access has now, but using Access Object Analytics. So I know that is in discussion and in the work. So we should see that hopefully sometime soon. I don't have any idea on the timeline on there. Occupancy and area, we could say humans. Earlier we had a bunch of people standing around the trailer. I could say if I have people standing, here, maybe I want to know how many people are in this area and what is the threshold at which point we activate this alert. So we can say more than 10, then we want to have this trigger, some event. Another thing to just point out is if your detections are not consistently accurate, there is this setting called scene perspective. And so adding a perspective would be helpful in improving results. And I'll show you. So you have to go to the settings, and we want to create a calibration perspective. And it is going to take a person to go stand out there. But you get a person to go stand, say out here, and we can adjust the height of the person to say it's this tall. There's a person. Have the person come stand closer to the camera and say, okay, well, from toe to head, they're this tall. And you can apply that to the different scenarios. And then you can give it a height. So this person is maybe 6 feet tall. You drop that in there as 6 feet. I can set it to you as customary, and then I don't have to do the conversion, so I could say 6 feet, and that sets your perspective. That just helps the camera be more aware of, I'm expecting people to be kind of this range at these different parts of the scene. You can turn on the bounding boxes. They can be burned into the image, or we can not, as well as trajectory outlines. So there's a lot there for sure. Okay, well, that's all I have to cover today. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that you continue to tune in as we cover different topics throughout the year. If there are ever topics that you want us to dig into deeper, please send them over. You can hit up Patrick or myself. Go to our marketing team. I'm on the sales team. And we can add those in. You can also, if you are ever watching this on YouTube, you can just leave comments in the YouTube on the YouTube video, and we look at those comments and try to respond, so we can get topics from there as well. But check out our website, check out the YouTube channel, keep an eye out for upcoming events, and we hope you see you around next time. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time.